Hey now Brawlers, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to take a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. That game is called Spell Stealers, and it's from designer and publisher Greg Santo. Now the story of Spell Stealers is pretty interesting. It takes place in a fantasy world where long ago there was an incredibly powerful spell that was sealed away in a sacred temple. It was written in prophecy that eventually that temple would open and people would be able to grab that spell, so all the different kingdoms in the land have been training specialized thieves called Spell Stealers to get into the temple when it does open and be the first one to grab that spell and bring it back to their kingdom for the greater glory. Now, each of the players in the game is going to represent one of those spell stealers trying to get into the temple, get the spell, and then get as far as they can into the temple with it in order to learn more of its secrets, and you're gaining artifacts along the way in order to propel yourself through the temple. Mechanically speaking, this is a push your luck dice game, but it doesn't just involve dice. You're actually moving your character through the temple, you have character cards, and of course you're interacting with the other players, trying to steal their artifact points, which are your impetus for going through the temple, and therefore move farther into it and get through to the center of the temple and the spell before the other players do. I won't say much more about it here. Let's go ahead and take a look at how the game is played and do a brief overview. Then we're going to come back and I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of Spell Stealers. This is a competitive game for 2 to 6 players where you are trying to acquire a powerful magic spell from an ancient temple and be the first to give it to your kingdom. This game is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter, so if you like what you see in this video, please consider going to the campaign page to learn more information and consider pledging to the project. I'm going to have a link at the bottom of your video screen and then down in the comments section as well, which will take you directly to the campaign page. Now, every player is going to get one of these character cards representing the color of character that they are. This is not just representing what your color is, but it also is how you keep track of whether you have stolen, because you can actually steal the artifacts that other players gain. If you do steal, you're going to flip your character card over like this to indicate that you've done that for the rounds, because you can only do it once per round. And it's got this cute chibi artwork on it. These are just 4 of the different character cards that come with the game. And you'll also get a set of dice, a 12-sided die, an 8-sided die, and a 4-sided die. These are your stealing dice. So when you do use your steal ability, that's what you're going to use. I'll explain all of that in a minute. You have all of your little player pawns. So actually you should only have 4 of them out here at the moment. And then you have an artifact tracker here. This is the little artifact track. Depending on which player's turn it is, you'll keep it at 0 at the start of your turn. And then these are the artifact dice. Now, on your turn, what you're going to do, the first thing is whether it's your first turn or someone just passed these over to you, you'll take the artifact dice, you'll put the artifact tracker at 0. Then you're going to secretly select an artifact die to combine with the success die. This is a success die, and on it are different colored symbols. Like it could be solo colors like green and red, and then other symbols that are both green and yellow together. And you'll secretly select one of the other 3 die, or the 4-sided die, the 8-sided die, or the 12-sided die. Now, what you're trying to do here is gain artifact points. As you go through the temple, you're going to try to gain artifacts because those are the way that you're actually going to move through the temple. Let's say that at the end of my turn, I actually end up with like 8 artifact points. Well, then I would get to move up 8 spaces. The goal is to get to the center of the dungeon because that's where the magic spell is. And once that happens, it triggers the end of the game, and whoever is the deepest into the temple once the game end is triggered and the round is finished, that player is going to win the game because they've acquired the spell, they've gotten deep enough into the temple to learn its secrets, I suppose, and that's going to trigger the end. But you need to get acquire and keep those artifact points, and this is where the push your luck aspect of the game comes into play. The reason why you're choosing the die in secret is because the other players are going to try to see what your die is and try to steal it, and steal your artifact points, but the only way they can do that is by seeing the die as it leaves your hand and then throwing the applicable die. So if you chose to roll the 12-sided die together with the success die, as no one gets to see it, you choose it like under the table or off to the side where no one can see it, And as soon as it leaves your hand, any of the other players that are watching you have the chance to throw the 12-sided die and potentially steal your points from you. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The way that you get points is by matching up whatever color comes up on the artifact die that you chose to roll with the colors of the success die. And it gets harder for each of them. For instance, the 4-sided success die, which is the easy die, all of the numbers here are green, which makes it really, really easy because most of the spaces of the success die have at least partially green on it. And you'll immediately gain that many points and move up artifact points and move up the track here. And you may be able to move up there if you decide to stop and keep those points. I'll get to that in a second. But you're only ever going to be able to get 4 points from that die. So you may want to risk it and go for the 8-sided die, which has green and yellow faces but goes up to 8. So it's not a guarantee because you might accidentally roll one of the red faces, but it's still a pretty good shot of getting you a lot of artifact points. But to get a lot of points, you're going to want to roll the hard die, the 12-sided die. But unfortunately, this involves 3 different colors, which means it's much more unlikely that you're going to be able to roll what you need. So for instance, let's roll these 2. See, I already failed. I got a red 5, and it's kind of hard to see. But the color that came up was green, which means that's a fail, and it immediately ends my turn. I have to put the artifact marker down to 0 if I had already acquired points previously and give all the artifact stuff to the next player. But if I had succeeded, let's say that this is what came up, which is a 10 on the 12-sided die and a green, I'd immediately gain 10 points, and then I have the option of either stopping, taking those points and moving that many spaces up in the dungeon, or pushing my luck and trying to go further. But remember, like I said, the other players are trying to interfere at this point by potentially stealing. So if this is what I was rolling, as soon as that 12-sided die leaves my hand, someone else can go, aha, and try to roll a number and beat that as well. In order to successfully steal, the number on the stealing die that player rolled has to be equal to or greater than the artifact die that player chose to roll. Let's say that it was. If that was the case, then that player, the stealing player, would steal that many movement points. Let's say that red had done that, and I had just successfully gained 6 points. Instead, the stealing player, red, would gain that 6 movement points. Now, that doesn't stop me as the active player. I can still decide to keep going. My artifact points stay where they are. I don't lose them. And at that point, I can decide whether to stop there or continue to roll and get more artifact points and just move. I just don't get to move right then and there for that artifact die that I had rolled. Now, let's say that the steal had failed, however. Let's say they rolled a 2 and I had a 6. You're only comparing the artifact die to the stealing die. Well, then the stealing player has to move back that many spaces all the way back to the entrance, potentially, according to the number that was on their stealing die. And regardless of whether they succeeded or failed, they also have to use their stealing power for the round, and they don't get it back until the start of their turn. That's one of the things that you do at the start of your turn is flip your character card back up. But in any event, once you do that, you decide whether you're going to push your luck, keep pressing forward. Characters may steal your points and whatnot. You are just going to keep doing this until one of you manages eventually, I'm just doing this thematically, you might get pushed back, gets to the temple or gets to the central area of the temple to get the book, or potentially past it. And then you are going to finish out that round. Whoever is the deepest into the temple at that point, past the bookmark, is going to be the winner of the game. They have claimed the book and have won for their kingdom. That is Spell Stealers. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Well, that's Spell Stealers, and you know, there are a lot of push your luck dice games out there on the market, but I think that Spell Stealers does a couple of unique things that many of those games simply don't do. One of them is player interaction. As you're going through the temple and you're rolling your artifact dice, trying to get as many points as possible and doing the push your luck aspect, the other players are actively trying to interfere with that by stealing those points from you, which a lot of, you know, it seems like such a simple idea, but so many games don't even bother to do something like this, which really has a huge impact on the gameplay. But what's really interesting here is the fact that even if you steal someone's points, it's great, it's putting you ahead, but you're not really tripping up the other player too badly because their turn continues. They now have the option of just quitting with what their point value was before or continuing on, which is a good thing because in a lot of games where there is this kind of interaction and being able to steal from the other players or doing the take that mechanics, it can totally ruin that other player's experience. You've set them back really, really far, and it really punishes them heavily. It's not so in this game. On the other hand, when you try to steal, if you fail, you will be punished for that. So there's where the core of the push your luck comes in, aside from just rolling the dice. It's the fact that you can steal, and it's going to be great, and you'll go really, really far ahead. But if you fail, you're going to go pretty far back as well. But there is a balance there. There is a trade-off. The other thing that I think that Spell Stealers does that so many other games don't do is that it's not just you with some dice rolling them on the table. It's you actually having a character card and having a board and being able to see your meeple moving along the board and having these cool dice to roll together with that makes it for a more thematic experience. I would not accuse most dice rollers of being very thematic, but I think that this one pulls it off much, much better than so many of those other types of games. And I will say that chibi style artwork on the character cards works on me, but I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. So I think that those are the different ways that Spell Stealers can set itself apart. And like I said, I only played with an early version of the game. It may look different in the final version, but it would probably look even better. So nevertheless, I think that you should take that as a pretty valuable information when deciding whether or not this is a game that interests you. If you like dice rolling games, I think that this offers more than your typical game, and therefore it would fit more of a niche in your collection, even if you have a lot of games like this. But it's especially good for families as well, which is definitely something to take into consideration because it's very easy to learn. It's very fast. You're not going to be sitting there at the table for too long. It can be anywhere from 15 to maybe 30 minutes at the absolute most. I think that the 20 minutes that says on the box is pretty accurate in that regard. And if people don't like the tense stealing aspect where you're rolling the dice really quickly and trying to trip someone up, which is one of the selling points of the game, but if that's a little bit too tense for either younger players or people who are just not familiar with this kind of game and don't want that kind of tension, then you can actually just do a variant where you don't play like that. You just give people the opportunity to steal from you. You can just say, okay, who wants to steal? Okay, roll your dice, whoever can do it first and fastest once you give them the option. Or you can even make it simpler than that and just do it in turn order, however you want to do it. And you can even play this game with 2 players. There's a variant for that makes it work. So if you like dice rolling games, if you like dice rolling games but you want something a little bit different, and if you like fantasy games that are a lighter fare, not necessarily a brutal dungeon crawl, and something that you can play with the whole family or with newcomers or even people who are experienced in games but want something fast and light, I think that Spell Stealers may be right up your alley. And if you're interested in funding the campaign and pledging to the campaign, I'm going to have a link at the bottom of the screen and also down in the comment section that will take you to the Kickstarter campaign page where you can find out more information about the game, see more samples of the artwork and things like that, and consider pledging. That is Spell Stealers from designer and publisher Greg Santo. My name is Nick, this has been Board Game Brawl, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way. Take care.